Okay, it's now recording. Can you see the record? Can you see the record symbol na? I can't pronounce the words correctly kasi we're allergic rhinitis ko kung ilong, I don't know. Sige, let's continue with our discussion. We have covered p-value and traditional method for z-score. So we're gonna take a look at when to use t-test. No? Sige. T-test for, I think we have covered the first item here, but just a sort of review, guys. When to use t-test, because some people might still be confused. I don't want to drop names, but they are confused. Why did we use Z test when in fact the sample size is less than 30? Your priority, guys, to check whether your sample size is greater than 30 or less than 30, you need to prioritize first if the standard deviation from the population is given or known. Regardless if the sample size is less than 30, if the population standard deviation is given, then you have to still use the test. Okay? So it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if your sample size is less than 30, but if your population standard deviation is coming from the population, then you have to still use z-test. Okay? Now, t-test, you're going to be using t-test for a mean, for a population, if and only if, first, the sample size is less than 30 and the population standard deviation is not given or is unknown. Okay? And once you pass the example or the problem for those two qualifiers, then you're good to go to use t-test. The solution or the test formula would still be the same, similar to the z-test. It's just that the symbol changes. And there's one additional example, degrees of freedom. So let's have one more example. We covered this last time, I believe. So let's work on this second example here. Traditional method. An educator claims that the average salary of substitute teachers in a school district in a local district is less than 870 per day. A random sample of if of 8 school districts is selected and the daily salaries are shown. Is there enough evidence to support the educator's claim? Assume the variable is normally distributed. Now, you need to ask first a question to yourself. Which one should I use? Should I use z-test or t-test? So right after you read the problem, guys, maog yun na dapat yung ipangutanas yung kagalingon. That's the first question that you're going to ask. Not to someone, but to yourself. Am I going to move on or no? Charot. Am I going to use z-test or t-test? I hope you can see can you see the screen? Can you see it? Right? Can you see it, guys? Yeah. I hope you can see it. Okay, so guys, please take note of what I am trying to say, guys. What I'm saying, bakay some of my some of my quiz, some of the items of my quizzes are from the definition that I'm saying, and then these definitions are not somehow written on the PowerPoint presentation. So if the given is population data, no, it's not necessarily population data. It can be anywhere. It can be from the sample data or the population data. The the clue there is your population standard deviation is given. That's the clue. Use z-test. Okay? Okay, that's a good question. Mao ni siya. Mao ni siya nga problem. Take a look at the problem. Read the problem again, guys. I'll give you 1 minute to read the problem. 11:15, so I'll get back to 11:16. Go. By the way, it's audible. Is it readable sa inyong end? And at the same time, madungog ra ko. Okay, last time biya nga nagklasita, I was at school, at the office, in your high school office, and then yeah, I observed the recording. Wala ka ng in and out akong voice. I was actually not using my V8. I was using V8 of Miss Charissa Ibona. And then I'm not sure nga ano nato yung V8. So yeah, read the problem one more time. And then let's see. Hello? Hello? Hello, hello? Madoko? Hello, my test, my test. Hello. Okay, so I hope everyone is done reading the problem now. All right, so excuse me. Let's ask ourselves, do we have a population standard deviation? The answer is no. There's none. It's not even explicitly mentioned that there's no standard deviation. I mean, wala siya specifically mentioned that there's a population standard deviation. So, in other words, the test that we're going to be using is we're going to use t-test. And if you're going to ask me, so is it nakalahi is a t-test or z-test when they have the same formula? T-test, guys, uses additional information, which is a degrees of freedom. Z-test doesn't have a degrees of freedom. Okay? Be careful on that. All right, so let's continue. What's going to be our null hypothesis and alternative hypothesis? So our null, very good. Our null hypothesis is a mean equal to 870. All right. And then our alternative hypothesis is what? Not equal to? Sure, not equal to? Good answer, Ricardo. Ricardo said less than 870. Very good. Guys, you have you have to catch carefully the what is meant in the problem, how to form your alternative hypothesis. It's here. Less than 870. And which one is the claim? The alternative or the null hypothesis? Null? It's alternative. Very good. It's the alternative. Here, an educator claims that the average salary of substitute teachers in school district in a local district is less than 870 per day. Good. We're done with step one. Step two. Finding the critical values using the T table. Okay, T test menta. So I'm gonna write step one and then step two. So first, we're gonna take a look at degrees of freedom. Degrees of freedom is n minus 1. Our n here, guys, is a random sample of 8 schools. So it's going to be 8 minus 1 equals 7, right? And our alpha is 0, sorry. Our alpha is 0.10. Is this a one-tailed test or two-tailed test? What do you think? One-tailed test. Very good. GV or GIV? One-tailed. There you go. So we're gonna open our T table. We're gonna open our T table here. Oh, guys, this is one of the advantages of the internet. Our resources are very easy to access. So let's check this out. I'm gonna take a screenshot sa para maka-annotate ko. T table. So here. Excuse me, mabasa yung numbers. Can you read the numbers on the table? How about that? It's a little bigger. And I think mabasa na siya. What do you think, guys? Can you read it na? Anyway, if you can't read it, just try to access this one. Just search on Google T table. So let's start with degrees of freedom, which is 7. Degrees of freedom 7 here. So we already found it. And then after degrees of freedom, we need to look for alpha 0.10. and at the same time one-tailed. So we have one tail and two tails here. So we're going to take a look at this one here. And then we're going to take a look at the alpha 0.10. So 0.50, 0.25, 0.20, 0.15, 0.10. So this is what we are looking for. Okay? And then we're going to look for the intersection of that 0.10 with one tail, and then the degrees of freedom, which is 7. So we're going to take a look at it. There you go. All right. Are we good? So it's 1.415. However, since this is a left-tailed test, if we're going to illustrate it, it would be like this. It's negative 1.415. So this is the critical region, or the rejection region or area. Okay? So it's easy na. Now, let's try to solve. Our third step is to compute for the test statistic. Akong pagamyan guys ha. Sige. So we're down to step 3, which is solving for test statistics. C equals, excuse me, sample mean minus population mean over the sample standard deviation over square root of n, right? So now looking at the problem, guys, are we given the sample mean? Do we have a sample mean? Wala. Diba? Wala. However, we are given the 8 sample salaries. We have 680, 590, 890. This means to say, guys, that you still have to solve for the sample mean using your calculator. So using your calculator, what is your mean? I'm using my Casio. Wait guys ha. Okay, you can see my koan. You can see my... Ano na lang. Sige. I do hope you can see my calculator. Sige. So you guys answered 828.75. So I'm gonna use my calculator. Guys, this calculator is very useful and very, 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 very convenient. So what I'm gonna do first is I'm gonna press mode, and then I have an option stat, which is option 3. I'm gonna press that. And then I'm gonna click on 1-var. Kanang first option, 1-var, option 1. I would have a table. So I'm going to plug in the number 680, 890, 590, and so on and so forth. So give me a sec. 590, 890, 900, 740, 950, 960, 920. There you go. So if I'm going to scroll up, I have already plugged in all the numbers. I hope you can see that. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And then I'm going to hit AC. I'm going to hit AC. It clears the screen. After clicking on AC, guys, I'm going to click Shift. And then I'm going to click 1. Option 1. Kaya naman ay option nga stat there. Kanang, I don't know if maklaro ninyo. Kanang murag second function na stat. So I have this option here. I have type, sum, distribution, min, max, data, 4, var. I'm going to click on 4. No, 4. Another, I have option. So kanang option 2, guys, is the sample mean, which is option 2. I'm going to click 2. And then I'm going to hit equal. Let's see if we have the same answer. The answer is 828.75. Perfect. So 800, oh, sorry. Yes, regardless ng aging motor, 828.75. Minus, the population mean, guys, is 870. 870. Now, the sample what we call this, the sample standard deviation is not given in the problem, so you still have to solve it using the data that you have. So how to do it, sir? You just have to press AC again to clear out the screen. You go back to shift 1, and then you have this option 4 still. So option 4, guys, you have 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, guys, is the sample size, okay? The 3, guys, is the population standard deviation. The 2, guys, is the mean. The 4, guys, is a sample standard deviation. So which one do I have to click, the 3 or 4? What do you think? Anyone aside from Burden? Burden said 4 though, sir, because it's a sample standard deviation. What I'm going to click Burden is actually 3. Why 3, sir? Why you are using the population standard deviation formula? Because the data that I have already plugged in, the numbers that we have already in the given, these numbers, 680, 590, 890, it's already the sample. Gets? So I would have just to solve for the standard deviation for that one because it's already the sample. It's already the sample coming from 8 sample of school districts. So I'm going to click equal. So the standard deviation is 130.43. So 130.43 over square root of 8. Let's try to simplify this. What's your answer? Um, let's try. 828.75 minus 870 over 130.43 square root of 8. Negative 89. Very good. I'm sorry, negative 0.89. Negative 0. All right. So our step 4 now, guys, will be our decision making. Do we have to reject the null hypothesis or accept the null hypothesis? We can refer our decision making in step 2. So take a look at the test statistic that we have solved. Negative 0.89. So where do you think negative 0.89 belongs? Look at this illustration here. Where do you think negative 0.89 belongs? White or the acceptance region? So in other words, this is an hypothesis test where we are going to accept the null hypothesis. Because negative 0.89 is somewhere here, man. Tama? And it's an acceptance region. And then, so basically, accepting this is true. That's true. Our conclusion would be, one of our statement conclusion is, it is true that the average salary is 807. You can also say there is no, or there's no enough evidence. How do I spell evidence? Oh, ito ba na? Evidence. Evidence to support the claim. The claim here is the alternative hypothesis, man. Here, this is the claim. So since we are rejecting this, we are accepting the null hypothesis, we can say that there's no enough evidence to support the claim. Question for that example. I hope you can see it. Question. Wala question so far? Masabtan ra? I'll give you 2 minutes for questioning. The standard deviation of this sample here. That's a good. Anika, are you using the calculator or you're using the manual solving it? Do you remember how to solve it manually? Manual or calculator? Manual or calculator? Manual. What's the formula that you use? Did you do this? 680 minus 828.75 squared plus 590 minus 875. Sorry. 828.75 squared plus dot plus 920 minus 828.75 squared over pilay n 8. Dapat mo mong answer 130.43. This is the variance, and then when you get the square root of it, that's the standard deviation. Okay, all right. So aside from the 130.43 clarifying questions of Anika, guys, do you have any other question for this example here? Before I'll proceed to the next example. Wala? Okay. Square lang, dili. After you do this, you get the square root. Okay, variance mini. And then ang kani siya kay standard deviation of the sample man. So after you solve this, dividing everything by 8, you get the square root for you to be able to get the standard deviation. Okay? Sige. Alright. So here, next example. So this is kind of complicated, guys. So I'm going to just show you the answer. For a p-value method for t-test. So here, a physician claims that Jogger's maximal volume oxygen uptake is greater than the average of all adults. A sample of 15 joggers has a mean of 40.6 ml per kilograms and a standard deviation of 6 ml per kilogram. If the average of all adults is 36.7 ml per kilogram, is there enough evidence to support the physician's claims? At alpha 0.05, assume the variable is normally distributed. So first thing first, guys, I also mo focus the steps, okay? You need to pre-qualify the problem. Should you use z-test or should you use t-test? Because as I said before, I'm going to give you a problem and I would not tell you what type of test you're going to be using, okay? What inferential statistic that you're going to be using. So in this example here, let me ask you a question. Are we going to use t-test or z-test? And whatever option you have, let me know why. Go. Okay. Angela said t-test. Sophia also said t-test. So let me know what are your reasons of choosing t-test. Okay. Again, as I've mentioned before, n or the sample size does not matter. Okay, regardless if your n is greater than 30 or if n is less than 30, the first priority that you need to check if the population standard deviation is given. Okay, so if you, let's say for example, your sample size is less than 30. Let's say for example, I don't know, less than 30, and then it such so happen that your population standard deviation is given. So which one do you use, z-test or t-test? In that example, you're still going to be using z-test, even though your sample size is less than 30. Okay? So in this example, good job, Angela. In this example here, guys, we're going to be using t-test. Okay? Even though it tells you that the standard deviation is 6 ml per kilogram, wala siya nisulti og population standard deviation. At the same time, wala po siya nisulti og sample standard deviation. You might get confused. So, sa meaning ng standard deviation, sample or population? That's a good question kung nagunahon na maging ana. But that question will be answered sa problem Rasad. Tanawa. A sample of 15 joggers has a mean of 40.6 ml per kilogram and a standard deviation of 6 ml per kilogram. Meaning to say, this 6 ml per kilogram standard deviation is coming from the 15 joggers, which is the sample of this problem. Clear? So in other words, we are still going to be using t-test. Okay? So I hope it is clear. So let's start with stating the null hypothesis and alternative hypothesis. Okay? So here, what's going to be our null hypothesis here and alternative hypothesis and our claim? Go. Before I proceed to the next position or next slide. Okay. Equals 36.7. Okay. And what is the excuse me, the alternative hypothesis greater than 36.7? Let's check your answers, Angela. There you go. So the null hypothesis is equal to 36.7 ml per kilograms. The alternative hypothesis is equal to 36.7 ml, no, greater than, because of this statement here. Question. No questions so far? Okay. So let's go to the p-value method, looking for the test statistic. So here, this is the formula because this is a t-test. The sample mean is 40.6. The population mean is 36.7. The standard deviation of the population is 6. And the sample size is 15 joggers. So that's what you see here. If we're going to simplify this using your calculator, the answer is 2.517, or you can say 2.52. Can you confirm it on your calculator, please? If we have the same answer. Do we have the same answer? Very good. Thank you so much. And then the determination or the determining process of the t or test status or no, the critical value for this p-value method, guys, in t-test is kinda libog basta di mo kagat sa process. So let's start. Now, specific p-value for test cannot be obtained. So dito kakuha sa p-value. We can only find the intervals of the p-values across the corresponding degrees of freedom. So here, pila may degrees of freedom na to aning example? Pila? 14. How did you know it's 14? You just have to do 15 minus 1. So you start here. Do you see the box or this one here? You start here. 14 degrees of freedom. Is this one-tailed or two-tailed? One-tailed. Gets? Yes, it's one tail because the alternative uses less than or less than. Okay, so the p value is obtained from the corresponding level of significance depending on the tail type. Thus, p value is less than 0.01 or 0.50. I don't know, greater than 0.02. What happens here? Awit man ng di ay ang greater than. What happens here? If you're going to ask me, sure, why not we are using the 0.05 kanisha, sir, and that's the alpha in the first place. Nganong niari man ka sa 0.025, sir, and 0.021? Why do you think? What do you think? Balik ko na kong question ha. Sir, remember we're using p-value method. Balik ko na kong question ha. Sir, why did you use 0.025 and 0.01 when your alpha, sir, is 0.05? It would be easier for us to just solve right away because if it had been this one here, nga atong gamiton, we can have this 1.761. What do you think? The answer is on the previous part here. You look at this one here, 2.517. Where do you think it falls? Across the 14 degrees of freedom. 2.517. Where do you think it belongs? So which interval it belongs to? Diba, if you're going to take a look at it, it's between 2.145 and 2.624, right? And why did I use this row here? Because this row is the degrees of freedom 14. Nagets? Nagets? Naka-follow? Naka-follow na? Okay. Now, this means to say, yeah, your degrees of freedom are, or no, not degrees of freedom. This means to say that your p-value should be between this interval here, 0.025 and 0.01. As I've mentioned earlier, you wouldn't be able to say or tell the specific p-value. So what we can tell is the interval lang. So the p-value, guys, should be somewhere here. This interval nga na red box. Okay? So, are we good na? Wala mo tayo specific na p-value. So, our p-value is here, 0.025. So, let me scroll down na ha. Okay. So, let's take a look at the decision-making grid. Look at here. The p-value falls somewhere between 0.01 to 0.025. That's what we see here. Tama? Now, are all these numbers less than or greater than alpha 0.05? What do you think? Sure? It's less than? Wala mo na confused? I want to make sure. Let's try to see. Sure na yun ang less than. Okay, very good. It's actually true. Okay, if imuning a round off on 0.025, guys, this becomes 0.03. Kanang 0.01 o 0.03, tanang numbers less than gina 0.05 kaya mas dako ba gid ni. Amen? Amen? So this means to say that since your alpha or your interval p-value is less than 0.05, we are going to reject the null hypothesis. Okay? And let's go back to the previous step. Our null hypothesis is equal to 36.7. We are going to be rejecting this. In other words, we are accepting this. This means to say that the maximal volume oxygen uptake should be greater than the average of 36.7 of all adults. Okay, so let's scroll down. Here's a decision making. Reject the null, meaning to say there is enough evidence to support the claim, or you can say there is enough evidence to support the claim that the jogger's maximal volume oxygen uptake is greater than 36.7 milliliters per kilogram. Yes, technically yes. Not really, Angela, because when you use p-value, we're talking about the area naman. Di ba p-value is just the area? Look on the previous example sa z-test. Here. P-value method. Okay. So here, the p-value method is the shaded area. So that's already, when you use p-value method, you're using the area of the standard normal curve. But if you're using this, if you're using the traditional method, you're using the critical value or the z-score or the t-score. Question so far? Okay, that's it for today actually, guys. Next meeting, we're gonna be talking about, because I don't know, makaya naman siguro 12 minutes to discuss. So yeah, I'm just gonna discuss this 12 minutes. So this is the criteria, guys, that you need to consider. This symbol stands for the population standard deviation. So if this symbol is known, use z-test. The variable must be normally distributed if n is less than 30. If the standard deviation is unknown, but n is greater than 30, use t-test. So if you notice, bisag dako pa imong 30, bisag dako pa imong sample size, guys, pero imong population standard deviation is not given or known, you're still gonna be using t-test. Next, if the population is still unknown, or the population standard deviation is unknown, at the same time, your sample size is less than 30, you're gonna be using t-test. So basically, the rule of thumb there, dapat known si population standard deviation, regardless of your sample size. Okay? So if known gani si population standard deviation, that means that you're gonna be using z-test. If unknown si population standard deviation, that means that you're going to use t-test. Z for zebra and T for tango. So here, another type of test, z-test for a proportion. This statistical tool will be used that involves proportion of the population or percentage. And this is the formula. The steps, guys, will still be the same. No questions, will still be the same, but the formula lahi lang. So let's take a look at the example. A dietitian claims that 60% of people are trying to avoid trans fats in their diets. She randomly selected 200 people and found that 128 people stated that they were trying to avoid trans fats in their diets. At alpha 0.05, is there enough evidence to reject the dietitian's claims? So if we're going to compare this example to our previous examples, guys, this example doesn't talk about mean anymore. Agree? Do you agree? This example doesn't talk about mean anymore, but instead, it talks about proportion, percentage na. Very good. So you would have a clue na kung sa gamiton. So we already have covered 3 types of tests. Z-test for a mean, T-test for a mean, and Z-test for proportion. T-test and Z-test for a mean, you're going to be using this when you're going to deal with means or average. And when to use T and Z, that's when the population standard deviation is known or unknown. Z-test for proportion, this is going to be used when your problem talks about percentage or proportion. And this is an example. Okay? Sir, do you have a t-test for proportion? No. Okay, that's a good thing. We only have a z-test for proportion. From theta. True. So again, the steps will still be the same. The process doesn't change. It's just that we are looking at different values. So let's try to solve. Our null hypothesis for this problem, guys, is what? So since we're no longer the average, this is the formula. So um, I'm gonna take a screenshot of that. We still have 9 minutes. I hope we can cover this in 9 minutes. This is the formula. And then let me take a screenshot of the problem as well. Okay, where are you? Here. So again, as I've mentioned earlier, guys, the steps will still be the same. So it doesn't change at all. It's just that the formula will be different. So we're going to be using the traditional method. What is the null hypothesis here? Now, remember that we are no longer dealing with means here, guys. This is no longer dealing with average. We're going to be dealing with proportion. So what is the first letter of proportion? P na lang atong nabiton. So P. 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 No. Ano lang? P. Ano? P. And then, para mas kanang na-design sa the P. Ano. So the P would still be no difference. It's the same thing, 60%. Sige. You can write 0.60 or you can write P equals 60%. They're just the same thing, okay? What's our alternative hypothesis? Less than, greater than, or not equal to? What do you think? Not equal to. Yes. So you can also write, there you go. Sige. Now, find the critical values. So this is the first one. First step is critical value. We're going to take a look at our z-score. So we're going to be using our z-score, z-table here. So this is a two-tailed test. Two-tailed man siya, di ba? Two-tailed. This means to say we are going to divide 0.05 by 2. 0.05 over 2. What's the answer? 0.025? Right? 0.025. This means to say that this is the area of both tails. No, not triangle. So here. This is the area of both tails. There. This is 0.025. This is also 0.025. We just need to look for what's the area of this non-shaded region. 0.50 minus 0.025. The answer is 0.475. Tama? Tama? This is 0.475. So we're going to look at this area sa tuang Z table. And then whatever Z score ana mo na to ang critical value. So let's you see my entire screen man, di ba? Sige, I hope we can see a clearer image of this here. So we have 4750. Diba? Kani, do you see the mouse, the cursor moving? This is 4750. 1.96. Very good. So the critical value, guys, is simple. Positive 1.96 and then negative 1.96. And then we're going to do the step 3, that compute the test value then, which is going to be a different formula na. This time it's going to be the formula. Okay? Okay. Now, Z equals, what is the P hat there? What do you think is the P hat? The P hat, guys, is the considered sample. Considered, or ako na lang matagkuhan ha, the sample size over the population size. Pizza Hut. So P Hut. So this is, what is the sample size? 128, right? And then no, dili din ako sayop nga sample size. Unsa ko man napag-explain ha? How do I label this? Ang numerator sa imong P Hut, guys, is katurang ni confirm kung pila ka buok ang ni-state or ni-take ana nga 60%. So, it's 128 over 200. So, basically, this 200 is the sample size. Let me write a small n. And then the numerator is the, how do we say it? The score or the actual people who agrees to it. So, that's why you can see x over n. What is 128 over 200? 0.64. So 0.64 minus the p, which is 0.60, over square root of p 0.60. And then how to know the q, guys? The q, guys, is equal to 1 minus p, rana. And that's equal to 1 minus 0.60, which is equal to 0.40. No? Yes. So agreed respondents selected over selected population or selected sample size. So 0.60 times Q 0.40, by the way, times that, guys, times, over N. What is N? 200. So let's try to calculate this using our magical calculator to make things easier. 0.64 minus 0.60 over square root of 0.60 times 0.40 over 200. I have 1.15. Do you get the same answer? 1.15. Can someone confirm it? This is multiplication. This one here. 0.60 times, that's times. I'm just gonna place parenthesis na lang. 0.60 times 0.40. And this whole thing here should be under a square root or under a radical symbol. All right, you would get 1.15. And for, yes, thank you so much, Alisa, for confirming. We only have 1 minute left. So 1.15, where does it belong in this illustration in step 2? Shaded region or the unshaded region? Or shall I say the rejection area or the acceptance area? Where's our chat box? Unshaded or acceptance. Very good, Ricardo, Alisa, and Angela. So in other words, we're gonna be accept HO here. So same regular ang steps, guys. Lahi lang ang formula gigamit. Clear? So our decision making for step 5, guys, we can say, indeed, it's true that 60% of the people avoid trans fats in their, I know, acceptation when I know, sorry. Like, exactly, it is true to avoid trans fat in their diets. All right. So questions, guys. It's already 12:01 and it's sakto na kayo na human pa. Question for 2 minutes na lang and then you can take your lunch. All right, then. Thank you so much, guys. And you do take care. And sure, I hope you guys can see the solution. Any more questions? You guys happy lunch as well. Maligo pa ko actually. Paligo. What's tea again? What's tea? What do we make tea? Spell the tea. Charot. Tea table. I already posted the last meeting, Alisa. Check the contents ato ang kuan Cielo. It's already uploaded there. Pero kuan lang kana unfortunately the voice ba kuang voice is like murag naa sa layo gani. I don't know. Again, as I've mentioned last time, I was at school when I had the class last week. I was helping the office kay walay secretary because nasunugan ang secretary and she was on leave for 1 week. And I was using Miss Charissa Ibona's kuan V8 sound card. And for some reason, guys, if ako i-plug in ako ang microphone sa iyahang V8, mura kog naas layo. Wait, if Z-test is a search, unsa ang area sa kana nga critical value from? Yes, mao na siya. Yes, yes, yes. All right, it's already 12:03. Gutom na guys. So take your lunch and kaon na. Take care. Bye-bye. Stop